All right, we're now moving to Module 7. And the first part is Chapter 13, which focuses on civil society and development. We have a twofold set of learning objectives for this. And the first is to be able to identify the agents of change in the process of local or community-based development. Second is to understand the role of civil society organizations in the development process in regard to the goal of generating more inclusive and sustainable forms of development, as well as empowering the poor to act for themselves. The overview of Chapter 13 is as follows. This chapter introduces you to the complex role that civil society plays in international development, the difficulty in establishing a definition of civil society is explained in the chapter, and you'll understand that civil society organizations are multifarious. That is, they come in many types and forms. The role of civil society in the post-Second World War paradigm of development is also explained, and civil society's ability to affect social change is analyzed in terms of agency, structure, and context. The economic and political dynamics of development and civil society are also examined in this chapter. The term that you must have heard used a lot, social capital, is also introduced. And you should think about how social capital is used within broader civil society and development discourses. We also look at debates on the role of non-governmental organizations or NGOs in civil society. And hopefully, we come out with an understanding that there's a lot of controversy over whether civil society, NGOs act as catalysts of change or agents representing outside interests. You will also learn how grassroots social movements in global South countries, such as the MST in Brazil, have entered the discourse to work for a different and more equitable world. You'll find examples in many different countries in the global South that are similar to MSD and the work that they're doing. Here are the key terms. First, civil society. Civil society, in brief, is the collectivity of social organizations that are not controlled by the state or business, such as church groups, environmental lobbies, and so on. The presence and active participation of civil society organizations is believed to be a necessary, if not sufficient, guarantee of democracy, good governance, and participatory development. Neoliberal globalization is a second term. This is an economic doctrine that repudiates the role of the state in the economy, preferring to leave the economy in the hands of the market. It also promotes the integration of economies and societies across the world into the new world order. That is a global economy based on the principles of liberalism and capitalism. Third, social capital. Social capital describes the networks of relationships between individuals and communities that provide to a greater or lesser extent support in times of financial, health, and emotional need and connections in terms of securing employment as well as broad and diffuse social trust. Fourth, social movements. Social movements are groups of individuals in civil society who join together to seek social change through collective action, such as workers' movements, civil rights movements, and environmental movements. Finally, sustainable livelihoods approach. This is a holistic approach that considers a wide range of livelihood strategies in rural areas, including but not limited to farming. Here are the key concepts in the chapter, and they constitute expansion of some of the key terms that you've heard. First is global civil society. Global civil society is the hope that will develop a framework and set of values that guide the behavior of non-governmental organizations and other bodies within civil society that can be an antithesis or the opposite to the established international economic order. A report by the United Kingdom Ministry of Defense suggests that growing inequalities created by processes of globalization may successfully unite disparate forces of resistance into a mass global justice movement. The World Social Forum is a space that annually brings together thousands of global civil society members involved in the anti-globalization movement. The forum sees itself more as a movement than a conference. It seeks to articulate a vision of another world where globalization is used to build transnational bonds, and it is not a process that only benefits a tiny percentage of the world's economic elites. While much of the attention is given to the annual World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, where world leaders, celebrities, and billionaires, now some trillionaires, assemble to discuss their vision of a better world. The World Social Forum seeks hybridity through the voices of grassroots organizations. Second key concept is neoliberal globalization. Neoliberal globalization is often thought to have emerged in the 1980s. However, This was merely a resurgence of ideas that momentarily had faded during a period of Keynesianism in the early to mid 20th century. Neoliberal globalization reversed many of the policies of government intervention that underpinned the improvements in socio-economic conditions in the 1950s and 1960s. It also witnessed an exponential or huge increase in wealth inequality, as 1% of the world's population now holds 44% of the entire household wealth in the planet. Finally, the concept of civil society organizations or CSOs. These are several different types of NGOs, or I mean NGOs that are referred to as CSOs or civil society organizations. They include associations, community-based organizations, um, private sector interest groups, and such organizations. Each of these types has a different potential to act politically in the development process. The second category of CSOs that are community-based organizations are seen by some to hold the greatest capacity to organize and produce radical change. Grassroots organizations are seen by some scholars as acting as the unwitting agents of imperial interests. So there's no universal agreement on the role of grassroots organizations and civil society organizations in the development process and in international politics. So let's let that sink in. Here are some of the things that I would like us to consider as a class. And this involves further discussion and debate on these weighty issues. The first is let's think about ourselves as a class, as the World Social Forum, the cool guys that are organizing to provide an alternative agenda and an alternative vision to how to organize internationally. So, we're the World Social Forum. I'm going to have us in class represent different grassroots organizations. So, as grassroots organizations, we should articulate or express our viewpoint and discuss ways in which another world could be built that is an alternative to neoliberal globalization. So then we come together, we present our opinions and positions, and we collectively create a statement about what we all think a better world should look like. A second thing is to think about anti-globalization movements and compare them to other social movements in recent times, such as the Black Lives Matter and climate protest movements. Are they effective? Why do we think they're effective? If we say that they're not effective, why? based on what we draw from our text and some of the other materials that we're going to look at. A third activity that we could do is to discuss the differences in demands from anti-globalization movements and populist political leadership, paying attention to Brazil, the United Kingdom, the United States, Russia, China, and maybe Nigeria. We could also debate this question. Do non-governmental organizations act as representatives of outside interests in the developing world? What do we think? Okay, a fifth thing is we view a short Al Jazeera documentary titled Cameroon from Africa's Palms. And this was featured in 2015 in the program People and Power on Al Jazeera. So when you view this documentary, you should take notes and discuss this clip, which focuses on oil farm production, and their effects on the environment. What are the effects also on people? And how are local activists and civil society involved in Cameroon? Other resources that are relevant to this subject, I'm going to mention four. The first is a film by Mark Dworkin and Melissa Young that was created in 2002, titled Another World is Possible. This documentary looks at the 2002 World Social Forum as an assembly of civil society groups from around the world that are trying to tell us their alternative visioning of a different world that does not privilege the interests of the 1%, but that of the 99%. Second is a video that was made in 2012 by Lily Paquette, and it is titled We Are Egypt, the story behind the revolution. And it was created in Cairo, Egypt, and it examines the role of civil society in the revolutions of what is called the Arab Spring in the Middle East. Third is a piece that was created by Tawanda Kanhema, titled The Prince of Malabo, Power, Money, and Impunity. Tawanda Kanhema is a journalist for Al Jazeera, and she can be contacted on Twitter so that you can even have a conversation with her at Kanhema Photo. So in the documentary, Tawanda and his team travel to Equatorial Guinea, where civil society is banned and disempowered. They go there to investigate the rampant corruption sponsored and rolled out by the Obiang family that has had its stranglehold on that country's politics. Then finally, number 4 is a piece by Christian Amanpour in 2012 titled One-on-One with the President of Equatorial Guinea. It's an interview with the President of Equatorial Guinea, Teodoro Obiang. That country has gone through a lot of twists and turns in recent times. Interesting country to focus on to see some of these ways in which civil society tries to influence policy and what states do in response, either to encourage or mostly to stop them. Other things we can look at are to examine some of these movements. One of the important ones that we could look at is the People's Health Movement. This is a global movement of activists and civil society groups that advocate for health for all of us human beings. There is also a piece by Fletcher Tembo made in written in 2003. It's titled The Multi-Image Development NGO, an agent of the new imperialism. This is published in Development in Practice. And the article examines the claim that NGOs often operate in favor of Western interests. There are also some that operate in favor of China. There are some that operate in favor of Qatar. There are some that operate in favor of Russia. But this one focuses on Western countries and their influence. Okay, there's an article by Terence L. Chapman, written in 2008, unraveling the ties between civic institutions and attitudes towards political violence. This was published in International Studies Quarterly, and it examines the question of whether or not a strong civil society can lead to a more peaceful society. Fourth, Malena Carmen and Finn Heinrich Volkert wrote a paper in 2007 titled, Can We Measure Civil Society? A Proposed Methodology for International Comparative Research. This was published in Development in Practice, and it suggests a methodology, a way that we can use for measuring civil society and assessing its usefulness or the lack thereof. A fifth article we can look at to add to our knowledge is by Hannah C. Appel. It was written in 2012. It is titled Walls and White Elephants, Oil Extraction, Responsibility, and Infrastructural Violence in Equatorial Guinea. It was published in Ethnography, the journal, and it explores the oil and gas industry in Equatorial Guinea and how inequality, uneven development, and responsibility are negotiated in this country. A sixth and final article that is relevant out of the hundreds of thousands is by Brian Pratt. It was written in 2016 in a special issue titled Civil Society Sustainability, Facing Up to New Challenges in Organizational Legitimacy, Viability, and Credibility. And it's in Development in Practice. This special issue in Development in Practice, all the papers in it focus on the challenges for civil society to remain sustainable. So that is what chapter 13 is about. And next, we're going to talk about chapter 14, which bring our attention to China and the emerging economies. That would be part 2 of Module 7.